This is such a beautiful dress and is actually easier to sew than you think. Let me show you how to do it. Hi, my name is Julie and welcome to my channel where we talk everything sewing. Today I'll show you how to sew this beautiful drapey form-fitting dress. This dress is made from stretchy ETY fabric. This is a two-way stretch fabric. It's very thin and very drapey, so perfect for this particular dress silhouette. We will first make the dress pattern and later we will sew it. This video is created in partnership with Organ Needles, needle industry experts. Let's start our tutorial. So first we will start by making our own pattern. You will need a dartless pattern block. If you don't have one, I will link one in the description box below. Since I'm working with very stretchy fabric, I will take in the waist and hips a little bit to create that form-fitting silhouette. This is what you want to do when you're working with very stretchy fabrics like ETY or LiQWYD. Also, I will narrow down the skirt bottom to create that tulip silhouette. Now I will cut the excess paper from the pattern, and since we're working on stretch dartless block, which is exactly the same as the front and as the back, I will draw a same line at the front piece. Now let's create the neckline at the front piece. You can create the neckline as deep as you want. I did about 12 centimeters and I widened the neckline by 1.5 centimeters and created that beautiful V shape. Now I will also widen the neckline at the back piece at the exactly same measurement as I did with the front piece, like this. Now your back piece is ready and you can set it aside. From the fabric you will be cutting two back pieces on fold. Now let's return to the front piece. Put big paper and put the front piece on top and draw around, marking waist and hip measurements. Remove the detail that you just drew around and set it aside. You will cut one pattern piece from fabric on fold. Now on the paper that you drew, I want you to cut it out and we will create the shape of our drapes. So I want you to mark the lines where you want your drapes to go, and they have to meet at the middle waist line. I will now also draw the shape at the top and at the skirt. Once you marked the gather silhouette, cut away excess paper and put it aside. Now we will create the slash lines. We will spread the pattern through these slash lines, creating gathers and giving dress volume. All slash lines end at the waistline, and ideally you would spread them at the top exactly the same width. Repeat the same with the bottom piece and separate the top and the bodice piece at the center waistline. Now let's move to the fabric and we will continue creating our pattern straight on the fabric. So I want you to cut the pattern piece right through those slash lines, leaving a few millimeters at the top so that the pattern does not fall apart. First we will do the top part. So I want you to follow the grain line, which will be at the center line, and I want you to place it parallel to the side of the fabric. Now spread the pattern as much as you want. Ideally you would be spacing the slash bottom at the exact width from each other. The more you spread the pattern, the more width you will create the gathers. However, know that if you're working with thicker fabric, don't spread too much because you will have trouble gathering it to one place. I actually ended up having to fold my gathers later on because simply the fabric did not gather to as much as I wished that to, so please keep that in mind. So now that I spread the pattern, I will draw around it. I will add seam allowance of 1 centimeter when cutting, and I will cut around this piece. I will need 2 of these pieces. For the skirt part, very similarly as to the top part, I will again cut through these slash lines and I will make sure that the center line is aligned parallelly to the side of the fabric because it is my grain line. Now I will also spread that pattern, however this time I will be cutting it on fold so that we don't have that seam in the middle, and we will need one piece which is cut on fold. When cutting skirt detail, don't forget to add more seam allowance at the top. Ideally you would be adding about 2 or 3 centimeters. Cut the remaining pieces from your fabric. Let me remind you that you need 2 back pieces and 1 full front piece. Once you have this done, let's meet at the sewing machine. So at the sewing machine, first thing that we will do, we will prepare the machine for work. So I will be using a stretch thread, which will allow me to sew with a straight stitch, standard straight stitch, and create an elastic seam. Also, I will be using Organ Needles jersey needle, or you can also use Organ Needle super stretch needle, which is perfect for sewing fabrics like ETY fabric or Lycra. Super stretch needle has thickened eye section, and because of that it can create an enlarged penetration area. The medium ballpoint ensures that the needle slips through the threads instead of cutting through them, thus the fabric threads are not damaged and do not break. And thanks to specially formed scarf, you will avoid skip stitches and ensure best seam quality. Super stretch needle is ideal when sewing knit fabrics like Lycra, ETY fabric and other knits. So now that the right needle is installed and the right thread is also installed, let's start sewing. So we will start by sewing the front pieces together. So first, take the front top pieces, put them right sides together and sew that right center line with a straight stitch and press it open. Now I want you to take one back piece, put it with the piece you just sew and sew at the shoulders and at the sides, right sides together. However, at the sides, sew just a few centimeters and not all the way through. Press the seams open. Now I want you to take the front full piece and another back piece, and I want you to put a thin stretch interfacing along the neckline of the front and back pieces on the right side of the fabric. This will stabilize our neckline and will allow us to create a better shape. Put those pieces wrong sides together, sew at the shoulders and a few centimeters at the side. Press the seams open. Now we will sew the neckline. So I want you to take both of those layers of the dress that we just made, put them together like this and base stitch around the neckline. Sew around the neckline using straight stitch. Once you are nearing down that V shape, I want you to clip in seam allowance to the about seam line and straighten it, and it will ensure that you create that very nice sharp V edge. Once you sew around the neckline, we will do understitching. To do understitching, push one side of the layer, which will be in the inside of the dress, and push the seam allowance to that side, and on the other side you want to leave the top fabric layer. So we will be sewing understitch on this part where we have the inside layer and seam allowance, and we will be sewing 1 millimeter from the edge, so all around the neckline. This stitch will ensure that the inside of the garment stays in the inside of the garment and will allow us to create a better neckline shape. Once you've done this, trim excess seam allowance and press it. So now we will create a sleeveless armhole finish. To do that, I want you to put the dress right side out, grab both layers like this at the bottom of the armhole. Then from the inside of the dress, I want you to grab those layers like this and pull the dress wrong side out. Now, holding those layers together from the bottom of the armhole, I want you to base stitch all the way to the shoulder. Once you've done this, from the bottom of the armhole, base stitch all the way to the top from another side. Now at the sewing machine, starting from the shoulder line, sew all around the armhole. Now we will do the understitching same way as we did with the neckline. Push the inside of layer and seam allowance to one side, the main top layer to the other side, and sew 1 millimeter from the edge on the inner layer and seam allowance side. So all around the armhole and trim the armhole excess seam allowance. Press the armhole and repeat it with the second armhole. This might be a little bit confusing, it was for me, and if you're struggling with this technique, I have a very detailed tutorial how you can sew a sleeveless armhole, so I will link it down below if you want to see more in detail this technique. So okay, now we will neaten the edges of our top dress layer. So we want to take the edges of the top part and the bottom part and fold it like this. So 1 millimeter from the edge, fold the fabric one more time and sew exactly at the same line. Repeat on all 4 edges that you need to secure. Now finally we will start creating the gathers. To sew gathers, set the sewing machine to the longest straight stitch, leave long thread tails at the beginning of the seam and sew at the bottom of that top front piece. Leave long thread tails at the end of the seam and also make another seam a few millimeters away from the first seam, parallel to the first seam. Now when you will hold the thread tails of both seams at one place, you will start pulling the fabric and creating gathers. Gather the fabric to the width you need as you marked in your own pattern. And now you want to do the same with the skirt detail. At the top of the skirt, sew 2 rows of long stitches with long thread tails, pull them together to create gathers in the width that you need. So once you have gathered the top and the bottom, I want you to take it and place it at the front piece like this. I've secured it with the base stitch, and now I will sew a few seams securing the gathers in place. So now our dress looks like this. We want to cover that front mess right here, so for that I will make a small tube from the same fabric. I will pull the tube inside in, and I will secure one edge, and then I will sew another edge like this, and then I will add a few hand stitches just to simply cover the raw edges of the gathers. So okay, the most difficult part is over. Now we only need to sew sides and do the hem. So to sew the sides, I want you to clip in the seam allowance at the top layer that we did and push it to the inside. Now at this point, both back layers and both front layers will be acting like one layer. So you want to put them together, right sides together, and pin along the sides of the dress. Now let's move to the serger. On my serger, I'm using organ needles EL705 CR chromium finish needles for best performance. These needles are also double grooved and have deeper scarf for better thread tension. All serger needles are suitable for sewing knit fabrics. This is why we can securely use them for this project as well. Also remember that you need to frequently change your serger needle. So at the serger, very simple, just serge both sides of the dress. At the top of the seam right here, you want to neaten the seam by pulling thread tail back to the seam using a big dell needle. Now the last thing that we need to do is to hem the dress. To do that, I want you to serge all around the hem, and again finish the seam by pulling long thread tails back to the seam. Pull the hem to the inside of the garment, press it and secure with the base stitch going right through the middle of that overlocker seam, because it will help us navigate the hem. Now let's move to the sewing machine. I'm using my domestic sewing machine because I will be sewing with hem with the twin needle. I'm using Organ Needle's twin stretch needle. From the right side of the garment, twin needle creates 2 rows of stitches, and at the inside of the garment it creates a zigzag, and because of that zigzag we get an elastic seam finish that also looks very professionally made. I like to use this needle when I'm working with knit fabrics and I want to achieve professional finish without cover lock. So on my sewing machine I have installed twin needle, threaded it with standard thread, no need for stretch thread right here, and I'm just simply sewing around the hem and my dress is finished. So I gave my dress a very good press, and this is the final result that I got. I absolutely love this dress. It came out so good, and I was a bit worried if I will enjoy the final result, but I actually love it. Yeah, so I will enjoy wearing this dress. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time. Bye!